All over the country you'll find war memorials like this one. They are a reminder to us of the many who gave their youth, their health and their lives in the service of their country. Today, in the UK where we live in relative peace, it's hard to imagine a time when the very existence of our country was under threat. World War II was the most destructive war in human history. In the period between Germany's invasion of Poland in September 1939 and the Japanese surrender in 1945, over 40 million people lost their lives. From Britain, 2.9 million men went off to fight, while here at home, bombs fell on our cities. There were many important dates during the war, but perhaps D-Day was the most momentous. A day when the course of World War II was changed and hope dawned across the war-ravaged continent of Europe. After the Allies had retreated from Dunkirk in 1940, the German army gained full control of Northern Europe, and by the end of 1943, Roosevelt and Churchill agreed that there had to be a full-scale invasion of Normandy in order to weaken the German grip on the continent. Operation Overlord was the name of the plan, and it would be the greatest seaborne invasion in history, with a naval force totaling 6,939 vessels, supported by 11,590 aircraft. An enterprise of this magnitude and importance took many months to prepare. All the right equipment and troops needed to be gathered, the right leaders selected, and the best strategies for effective deployment, attack and advance needed to be in place so that the plan would have the greatest chance of success. Many air reconnaissance missions were flown to observe the German defences. Surveys were carried out to select the best beaches for the invasion, tidal patterns and weather forecasts were commissioned, and a number of dress rehearsals took place. An important part of their preparations was Operation Fortitude, a deception strategy designed to confuse the Germans and draw their attention away from Normandy. Double agents fed false information to the Germans about troops being gathered in the southeast of England. Inflatable tanks and fake landing craft gave the impression that the invasion was aimed at Pas-de-Calais, across the narrowest part of the English Channel. The date was originally set for the 5th of June but had to be delayed due to bad weather. The largest seaborne invasion in history was finally launched on the 6th of June 1944. The first stage of the invasion was to drop paratroopers from the air and to land some in gliders, with the aim that they would capture strategic bridges, hold important towns, open roads and meet up with the forces coming by sea. Around dawn, Allied warships began bombarding the German defensive positions in Normandy, trying to destroy the batteries which would pose a threat to the invading troops. The first troops ashore were the American 4th Infantry Division, landing on Utah Beach. By the end of the day, they had advanced nearly 4 miles inland along routes opened by the paratroopers dropped earlier that day. At the same time, troops from the US 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions landed on Omaha Beach, the largest and most heavily fortified of the assault areas. Here, the Americans came close to defeat, as neither the Allied airstrikes or naval bombardment had managed to knock out the German defences. And the tide was low, meaning the landing forces had to cover about 500 metres of beach before being able to take cover from the onslaught of German artillery. There were difficulties clearing the obstacles on the beach, and only 2 of the 29 amphibious tanks launched made it to shore. But by the end of the day, a small foothold was gained on the beach, and at the nearby Point du Hoc, US Rangers scaled 30-metre cliffs to take German gun emplacements. But the casualties were high here, and by midnight on the 6th of June, 2,400 American soldiers were dead, injured or missing. Meanwhile, at the eastern side of the landing areas, British and Free French forces were landing at Sword and Gold beaches. On Sword Beach, the troops faced the obstacles of bad weather, rising tides and strong German resistance. In order to advance inland, armoured support vehicles were needed, but they had trouble in getting them ashore because the area open for the forces to land was narrow, causing delays and congestion. This meant that the British 3rd Division and their French allies did not succeed in their key objective, taking the city of Caen. On Gold Beach, the British 50th Division and 47th Royal Marine Commandos had more success. Whilst they faced similar adverse conditions with high winds and tides, the German defences here had been weakened. By the end of the day, the British troops had advanced about 6 miles inland and managed to join up with the men from the Canadian 3rd Division. The Canadian troops had come ashore on Juno Beach, which lay between Sword and Gold beaches. Casualty rates within the first hour here were high, as the Canadians, though dreadfully exposed, fought to overcome the heavily fortified enemy positions. Their amphibious tanks had been struggling to land in the rough seas, but once they had arrived they enabled the forces on Juno to advance several miles inland and link up with the British forces from Gold Beach. At his daily military conference in the Bavarian Alps, Hitler and his commanders make the mistake of continuing to believe what the Allies wanted them to believe, that the attack is a diversion for the real invasion. A gap of about 2 miles in the lines between Juno and Sword beaches became the site of a German counter-attack. A panzer division is involved in a pitched battle, and whilst a few Germans make it to the coast, many of their tanks are destroyed. Meanwhile, the BBC broadcasts a speech from French General Charles de Gaulle in which he calls on Frenchmen to fight with all the means at their disposal. The British troops of the 50th Division, who landed at Gold Beach, neared its first objective, the town of Bayeux, but they are still 3 miles short and the town would not be liberated until the next day. All through the day, the battle had raged along the 55-mile long front. There had been some success and some ground gained, but as night approached, the fighting did not stop, for some German units were still defending the beaches and more of their troops had moved north. Back in Britain, King George VI made a public broadcast to ask the people to pray. Some have called the Normandy invasion the beginning of the end of the war, for by late August 1944 all of northern France had been liberated, and by the following spring the Allies had delivered the continent from the oppression of the Nazi regime. But all the achievements came at great cost, not just in terms of finances and hardware. Of the 156,000 soldiers who landed in Normandy on D-Day, around 21,000 were injured and over 4,000 lost their lives. So many have benefited from their sacrifice, and today we bask in the freedoms that were so hard fought for. We must give thanks to God for his deliverance by his hand. Nevertheless, greater things were accomplished on another day, one which happened hundreds of years before. This day, known in the Christian calendar as Good Friday. On this day, salvation was achieved and peace with God was won for all who would believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. Such a day was long planned for. Even before the beginning of time, God in his wisdom possessed this plan. Through time, as we have it recorded in the Old Testament, we see the plan revealed through various signs, events, laws and prophecies. This plan wasn't to be kept secret, was to be made known to all. So now in the New Testament, we see the fullness of what God did through Jesus Christ on that Good Friday. This plan was necessary because of the dreadful state of mankind. Sin enslaves the heart of every human being. Rebellion against God follows, and each human being must face the just punishment of God forever. Deliverance was needed, and this is what Good Friday brought about. As that day unfolded, the focus was upon one person, Jesus. He had in the night hours received an unfair trial and was sentenced unjustly to death. He had never done anything wrong, and yet many conspired against him to end his life. Eventually, he was led to the hill of Calvary and was nailed to a cross. All of this happened according to God's eternal plan. For amid the strange and unusual daytime darkness, the one man, the eternal Son of God, laid down his life as a sacrifice for sin. He took upon himself sin's penalty, and in doing so secured peace for all who believe. His resurrection from the grave would prove the success of his mission, as he achieved the salvation and peace long planned for. This peace with God is a peace that will endure. It's not just for a year or a generation, but forever. By faith in Jesus Christ, you can benefit from such a peace today. You can be delivered from the oppression, slavery, and guilt of sin, and be set free to know, love, and be with God forever. God in Jesus Christ, through the eternal strategy and loving sacrifice, has done everything to purchase peace and salvation. Will you receive it?